All right, guys, we're live. Thank you for joining me back on another edition, another Cardinal Craze episode. Today on the show, our special guests today are Matt McGavick from the Louisville Sports Illustrated edition, Ashton Gelati, the Louisville commit, and Mark Rogers, the voice of college football and one of the writers for ESPN. How's everyone doing today?
Doing pretty good. How about yourself, man?
Oh, I'm doing good.
We've got a writer from ESPN on here?
I thought you were a writer.
No, I was never a writer for ESPN. No.
Oh, okay.
Not at all. Not at all. No.
My mistake.
Worked there for a long time, but no, not at all.
Oh, my mistake. I thought you were a writer. Okay. Well, all right. Thanks for joining me on the show. We're going to be actually previewing the Louisville Notre Dame game. And so how's everyone's feelings after this past weekend's unfortunate loss to Georgia Tech?
I mean, going into this game, it was already going to be a tough sell because Notre Dame is one of the best teams in the country, and so far this season, they're starting to live up to their billing. I think they've already established themselves as having one of the most dominant, if not the most dominant, offensive line in college football, and that inevitably leads to buying more time for Ian Book for him to just sit back in the pocket and find the man that's open, and that leads to more holes for the running game. So it was already going to be a tough job. It's a little disappointing, obviously, coming off of that Georgia Tech loss. So I would like them to be in a better spot, but at this point, it's going to be difficult.
All right. Now, one of the first things we're going to be talking about is the infamous Notre Dame O-line. And the question is defeating the O-line. So what's your all's perception on Louisville having a chance at defeating one of the best O-lines in the entire nation?
Well, I got to think that in watching the one game that I saw start to finish was the Miami game, and I saw a good portion of the Pitt game, and I'm just looking overall at Louisville as being maybe at this point maybe the most disappointing team in the country based on the expectations that I saw all over the place leading into this year. 3 losses in the ACC, losing by 3 scores. And I know it was a close game against Georgia Tech, and they had a lead in the fourth quarter. So it wasn't a typical 46-27 game that they got blown out start to finish by any stretch. But, yeah, so to see that defensive front, I would think that they're going to have to do miracles in practice this week to size up against Notre Dame's offensive line.
Yeah, of course. Now, one of the things that we've kind of noticed during the Georgia Tech game was, you're right, Mark, defense has kind of taken a step back this year. Unfortunately, we're not as too sure why it's happening. I mean, in 4 games. I mean, now, mind you, the Western Kentucky game was one of the best games so far throughout the season. Now, they did start to hold their own against Miami, but it eventually crumbled. Now, one of the things that I am kind of questioning is, what is going to happen during the Notre Dame game? Are they going to be a little bit pumped because it's a top-ranked team? Is there going to be a little bit more energy? Because what we saw during Georgia Tech was they lost energy. During that fourth quarter, when Georgia Tech got that huge lead, I mean, we just kind of saw a lack of energy towards the end. It was almost like we got the lead, and then all of a sudden, well, we can just, it'll be fine. We'll just take our foot off the gas. But outside of that, it's just been a real question as to what's going to happen against one of the best O-lines in the country. But,
I would hope that they're going to have a lot of energy for this game. I mean, top 5 team, national audience. But the fact that we're hoping that they're going to have more energy for this game as opposed to the rest of the season, it's a little bit concerning considering what happened last year, because under the first year under Scott Satterfield, it seemed like there was a lot more energy. There was a lot more, for lack of a better phrase, they seemed a lot more hungry. And not to say that drive has completely gone out the window, because obviously there's still players, they want to win, but it seems like their sense of urgency isn't what it was this year compared to last year, which I think it'll eventually get turned around. I'm not entirely sure why that is the case, but that's just an observation that I have made so far.
All right. Well, one of the things that we kind of noticed during the FSU and Notre Dame game was that Ian Book actually had 25 attempts, and out of those attempts, he had 64% completion. He scored for 2 touchdowns and averaged about 8 yards per pass. And honestly, I really don't see the Louisville defense being able to step up entirely against this high-powered Notre Dame offense. It's very sad to say, but unfortunately, the defense is having a lot of issues, like you said, Matt. And some of those things that they've actually talked about is filling those leadership roles, having guys being accountable for what's happening. And there's just been a lot of issues all around. Now, unfortunately, saying that it kind of brings up that big question: can Louisville be able to withstand a beating? Essentially, I mean, I know it's a tough thing to look at, but unfortunately, I seen this. Unfortunately, I feel like Notre Dame's going to run away with this game if the defense can't step up, which brings up, one of my next questions is, I guess, pressure on Ian Book. Is that even possible?
I think it's definitely possible. It's just going up against that offensive line. It's just difficult because Louisville is like to run a lot of 3-man rushes, 4-man rushes, and even going up against teams like Georgia Tech, against a Miami, a Pitt, WKU. There were some times where they struggled to actually get pressure when not blitzing, and they were kind of picking and choosing their down and distances, and at times they were showing some flashes of brilliance as to being able to pressure the quarterback, but none of those offensive fronts were as good as Notre Dame because, like we've established, Notre Dame is arguably the best in the country. So, in theory, it's possible to get pressure on Book. I just don't know how much is going to happen in this game because of how great that front is.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably a typical situation where defense is a bit outmanned, where the best counter to that is to try to be creative and keep them guessing. So not to over blitz, not to play a standard set all the time, but to mix it up, mix up the coverages, mix up the fronts. But then over the course of a game, the odds say that you're going to get caught a few times, if not more than a few times. You're going to get caught in the wrong look at the wrong time, and you really expose yourself that way. But I think that's the only way to spring an upset is, you got to go one of two, ends of the spectrum on a strategy of trying to force a Notre Dame to dink and dunk their way down the field and force them to make a mistake, meaning that if you're forcing them into a 75-yard drive and it's going to take them 13 or 14 plays, and then you make one, negative play behind the sticks and you get them into a 2nd and 12, or, they misfire on a pass and then you get them behind the stick and you make them drive the long field, or you try to press the issue and you bring pressure and you figure that, they may torch us for 500 yards, but if we get 3 turnovers in this game, that might be the difference in trying to pull off an upset.
All right. And you're right, Mark and Matt, you're definitely right. They're going to have to change it up. They're going to have to try and confuse the offensive line. They're going to try and, cause chaos. And honestly, it could turn into a very sticky situation for Louisville on defense if they can't step it up. One thing I do kind of look forward to is having a little bit more depth next season, having guys who are more comfortable with that 3-4 defense as opposed to taking guys who are not comfortable and putting them in a situation in their second year where leadership may be down a little bit, guys aren't being more accountable than how they were last season, and we're just kind of scrambling all over the place. But, that kind of really – I'm not sure why leadership seems to be down. I'm not sure why guys aren't as accountable as they were last season. Something transitioned from last season to this season. I don't know if COVID threw everyone off. Heck, we saw NC State kind of go from the ashes, and now they're I think they're on 1 loss so far. But it's been it's just been kind of a crazy season. All right, so we kind of move on to our next subject, which would be the deep passes. Now, you actually talked to Scott Satterfield, Matt, earlier today, and you kind of talked to him about the situation regarding Louisville, and he had mentioned the deep passes, not being able to make those that he made last season. Not being able to actually be that creative, especially with the issues on O-line.
Yeah, and he had mentioned in this press conference during this first year that they were able to hit on a majority of their long shots. They were able to create a decent amount of turnovers. And this season, for whatever reason, that just hasn't been the case. We saw Malik miss several deep shots. Of course, some of that was not of his own fault. I mean, that first drive, Ian Pfeiffer, while it was a little overshot, that's something he very well could have caught. But we saw in the Pitt game, we saw in the Miami game, he has continuously missed a lot of his deep shots. It's a mix. Maybe it's a mixture of him having happy feet because of the offensive line, or some other unknown issue that we don't know. But it doesn't take a completely trained eye to notice that there's something off with connecting on those deep shots. And then when you add the fact that Louisville's defense is not creating turnovers, that just further compounds issue.
Now, one thing I was kind of happy to see was that Mikhail Cunningham actually didn't have any interceptions this game against Georgia Tech, and actually was able to pass for 229 yards. He had about 33 attempts and 57 completion ratio, which I was actually very happy about. But you're right. It's the tone has changed with this Louisville offense this year, and we're not sure why it's changed. But for the most part, Ashton, what do you think about this situation in regarding deep pass and not having enough time in the pocket to be able to make those dynamic and explosive plays?
Well, I'm a defender, so I mean, I can understand why Malik's having a harder time in the back, because I mean I watch the games, but it's not holding up nearly as long as it should be, or like comparable to like our opponents. I forgot what it was. So, yeah, Miami's quarterback had like 5, 6, 7 seconds per play almost to sit in the backfield and just think and throw a ball. Like Malik doesn't have that time, and he's got to kind of, work with it. It's unfortunate, but I mean, you can't expect to go deep passes really off just like a 2-3 second pocket. Like, I don't know.
Well, obviously, being a defensive player, it must. It must be frustrating for you to watch the Louisville defense, how it struggled through these 4 games. It must make you just want to jump on the field right now and help out Coach Scott Satterfield.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of brings up our next topic, which Scott Satterfield talked in his press conference earlier that Matt was there for, making tackles, one of their biggest issues. And Scott Satterfield even mentioned that Louisville has had bad tackling the past 3 and 4 years. And it wasn't someone actually asked him if it was during his time at App State that he was referencing the 3 and 4 years they've had bad tackling. He said, no, Louisville has had bad tackling for, 3 to 4 years, and it's been an unknown reason why, but he's trying to work on it. They say they work on it during practice. They try and constantly make corrections, and he said it's honestly a type of issue when it comes to tackling at certain angles and, knowing when to tackle and, how close to get and different situations like that. Now, what's your all's perception on tackling?
Well, first of all, it's been an issue around the country because of the lack of practice. And because not just the lack of practice, but a lot of coaches have commented because of the nature of COVID and wanting to be safe and adhere to the guidelines that they've reduced the tackling significantly. So no spring practice for technique to improve the fundamentals, and then limited contact practices has led into this issue. And we see points being scored all over the place against teams that we don't normally see points scored against, like Alabama and LSU. And then on top of that, I just think that, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm trying to think how many times I saw Louisville play last year, probably 5 times, but you guys see every game. that if you're looking at a defense that whether it's the traditional statistics or the advanced metrics is a bottom 10 to 15 defense in the country across the board, I got to think that was one of the big issues.
Yeah, they had around, I think the number was 102nd or 103rd total defense or scoring defense. And going into this season in that WKU game, I thought that they were starting to make good strides. They did a better job of containing some of those big plays. Now, even though they were given short field a couple times because of the special teams gaffes, they ended up giving 21 points, but that wasn't necessarily completely on them. Starting up the season, I thought that they were going to look radically better. And then we see what happened against Miami, and you think, okay, maybe they're not making as much progression. But then you go the next week, and then the defense is what kept them in the game against Pitt, because the offense could not get anything against that stout Pitt front seven. And then the defense, they kept it in the game, and Louisville had about two and a half minutes left in the game to try and make a drive happen. And unfortunately, the offense just came up short. And it seems like the defense isn't finding any sort of consistency. Now, it might be due to the odd nature of the season because of COVID, but it seems like they're having an up and down year. But for totally, it seems like they're still struggling with a lot of the same issues from last season, such as giving up the big plays, because they gave up their fair share against Georgia Tech and Miami.
The Miami game was very interesting. Like, because again, I play defense, so like watching things like that like just irks me. Like, we let 2 touchdowns in for 75-yard plays, all like just big breakthrough plays, and I don't know. Moments like that, like you see where they could fix it, but I mean, it's just they're just gonna have to practice getting like consistent with playing how they should play, because you see glimpses of it always.
Yeah,
but they just don't hold on to it, I guess. But
well, for the most part, we hope that these glimpses continue, and obviously with the continuation of the recruiting classes changing and the 3-4 guys coming into the system that'll actually help out Louisville, and we'll see some of that old App State offense and defense that was so dynamic and explosive when Scott Satterfield was there. Now, one of the things that I do want to kind of talk about is what can be fixed. Now, mind you, they only have a week to prepare, and we're about 5 days away from the game. In that time, they're going to be focusing on tackling. They're going to be focusing on blocking. Blocking has been one of Louisville's biggest struggles on O-line for the past 4 games, and honestly, it continues to be a struggle. Now, mind you, we actually saw a lot of positive things during the Georgia Tech game up until the 4th quarter. Now, O-line was making some good blocks. Javion Hawkins was making some good runs. Now, he didn't run as much as he did probably in the 2019 season, but he's been making decent strides each game. But what, in your perception, can actually be fixed?
They just need to have sound fundamentals and play with a little bit more visible effort, because that's one of the first things that any team can fix is that. And so far through the season, there have been several times where they have complete breakdowns in fundamentals, whether that's on the defense, on the offensive line, at the quarterback position. For some reason, a lot of those fundamentals that seem to be so incredibly sound from last season seem to be on shaky ground this season. And that's compounded by the fact that there have been times where they just look like they're not giving it their all for some reason. And unfortunately, even when they do fix those kind of things, I still think it's going to be perhaps a little bit of a rough season, because whenever – this is in any sport – when a team comes out with a new concept or starts to make some noise, teams are immediately going to try and figure out a way to counter that. I think Louisville's going to have a tough time countering those counters because the roster is still kind of, I don't want to say mismanaged, but it's unbalanced still from the Bobby Petrino regime. Now, Scott Satterfield and company is working to get a lot of those guys in, and they did a good job of that, dealing with what they could in their first cycle. But even with the amount of playmakers Louisville has, they're still largely unbalanced. So even if they do fix the fundamentals, they do fix the effort, it could still be a struggle for the rest of the season, because the 8-5 campaign from last year kind of made people forget that Louisville's still very much in a rebuild. those kind of seasons like 2019 don't happen often for a reason, because they're so incredibly rare. That just doesn't happen to have a 6-game turnaround like that in college football. So it made people kind of forget that, oh, there's actually still a lot of work to be done. So a lot of people, myself included, had higher expectations going into the season, and maybe we should have tempered those a little bit, but we were just so enamored by the start from last season that we thought that maybe they were skipping a year in the rebuild.
It wasn't even necessarily just Louisville people, but if you check out the Football Power Index, I picked all the games across the country, preseason, and comparing my win probability percentages to the FPI. The FPI was extremely high on Louisville. I'm trying to think what the numbers were against Miami. It was something I couldn't believe. The preseason number, not necessarily the week of the game, but just a couple of weeks earlier, it was like 83% win probability against Miami, which I thought was crazy. I was more in the 55-45 range. But I'm looking at I watched the Georgia Tech game, and, all the things that you guys are talking about is you guys are locked in on this team, are right on point in regards to, you lose Mekhi Becton, and based on everything I read about Louisville coming into the season, it wasn't just, you lose one of the best offensive linemen in the country, but on top of that, there were depth concerns across the board. But then just again, it's reminding me of watching the game, looking at the box score here, and I go through and see Javian Hawkins 155 yards, 6 yards a pop. You should be able to control the ball, obviously, with that kind of ground game, and he's one of the best backs in the ACC. But you cough it up 4 times and you lose 3 fumbles. Hardly any team ever wins losing 3 fumbles. So it might be just that simple, not necessarily against Notre Dame, but against a team that's playing at Louisville's level, that, if you hang on to the ball, protect the ball, win the turnover battle, then most of the time the percentages say that you're gonna win that one.
Mm-hmm.
I'll have to agree with him. I was actually going to just say that. I was just say ball security is something we really need to focus on, based on just, I tuned in almost at a halftime and was immediately greeted with a fumble. So, I don't know. Ball security is just something very important, and I think we need to emphasize that more. And that's something we can fix now, immediately. Depth is something that's something you got to pick up over the next year with recruits and stuff like that. But ball security definitely is a necessary thing that we need to focus on.
Yeah, of course. All of you are exactly correct. And, just like you said, Matt, the roster is a little bit unbalanced from the Bobby Petrino regime. I loved how you said regime and not coaching staff. That's very accurate. Now, and going back to what Ashton and, even Mark was talking about, recruiting will get better. It just takes time. And you guys are right, talking about the fact that last season almost seems like a fluke season, first year rebuild. And all of a sudden, we're 6-game plus win from where we were last season. And it kind of, or even, 7, honestly, I think. But for the most part, over time, this is going to get better, and if we look into the future, it is very optimistic. This team is going to gradually get better. Now, mind you, they're going to get that talent in, like Ashton, of course, down here. He's going to be bringing in that heat coming into the Ville. So one of the things that I kind of want to look at is, what do you think is going to be the defining situation for Louisville this year? What do you think people are going to look back and remember this season as, outside of COVID, obviously, because that's going to be a reminder for a long time?
It's kind of hard to put a finger on what exactly it's going to be at this point, because it's still about a third into the season.
Yeah.
But I'm hoping at the end of the day, of course, you're going to have some fans that are already jumping off the ship and declaring the sky is falling. Yeah. But the coaching staff just still needs to stick to their guns, stay consistent, because, like it or not, but most fans don't want to accept this, but Louisville is still very much in the rebuild. Like I said, they just need to stick to their course. it's not going to get righted in one game. I mean, especially when you're playing the number 4 team in the country, it has the potential to get out of hand hurry, and that's no fault of Louisville's. But the coaching staff just needs to stick to the course, and I'm hoping that at some point down the line, this season can be viewed as a stepping stone to what is building towards the future, because a lot of people thought that they just kind of skipped the stepping stone altogether with the kind of season that they had. But because they had such a great season, it kind of put a mask on some of the issues that Louisville still had, and people didn't want to acknowledge because they'd done so well. And now some of those issues that Louisville should have had last season are coming to light, and they're thinking, oh, there's something wrong with the coaching staff. Oh, get rid of this, get rid of that. But no, this is just growing pains. It's just rebuilding pains. So I'm hoping that people just can stay sane, stay grounded, and realize there's work to be done. Just let them do the work.
Yeah.
I guess when it's all said and done in Scott Satterfield's tenure, either this season's going to be an aberration, and the season's not over, like you said. At 1-3, it's not good. It's not good to lose the first 3 in the ACC, but it can still be salvaged. Not a conference title, but a 6-3. Well, what are they playing? 7-4 kind of year. Could be salvaged. Something in that range, 6-5, 7-4, and if so, then it just becomes, part of the ascension of Scott Satterfield's tenure and part of the process of building a consistent winner at Louisville. Now, if this turns out to be a debacle and they go 2-9 or 3-8 and they never recover, then this is going to be remembered as, well, Scott Satterfield had that promising first year, and then 2020 turned out to be, along with COVID, the year that it all came unraveled and they never recovered.
Now, for the most part, I think this is going to be a defining moment for Louisville. I think this is going to be kind of a situation where this is going to be something to build off of. And you're right, Matt, going into the season and, Mark, the hype was big. It was extremely big. And, I think after last year, everyone's expectation was they're going to build off last year. They're going to get to a conference championship, and who knows, maybe even the playoffs if it happens. And you're right. I actually went to Twitter as soon as Georgia Tech lost, and I saw all the fans, all the diehard people who are always going L's up, L1C4, and they're all in there going, we need a new coordinator. We need new coaching staff. We need to fix this. This needs to be fixed. We need to hire such and such. And it's like, first off, we need to calm down, because you guys are right. We are in the second year of a rebuild. We still don't have great depth. It's a little better from last year, but we still have guys that don't fit the Scott Satterfield system. This is not, Brian Brown's defense. We're still using Bobby. It's almost 25-75 mix between Scott Satterfield's guys and Bobby Petrino's guys still coming. Still in the system. Now, mind you, not saying they're bad players. I'm not dissing anyone. I'm just saying that we have guys in there that have played a different style of defense. They did a better job than Bobby Petrino 2.0. And honestly, they're doing a lot better than they did last season. They're not giving up as many points. Personally, looking at it, it looks bad, but it's not as bad as it was last year. Offense is having a little bit more issues. Mark, you were right. Losing Mekhi Becton was huge. And, I know we've been kind of negative a lot about Louisville. I didn't want to kind of go in here being as negative as it kind of comes off. But, for the most part, I'm very optimistic about future. I really think that, Mark, you're right. I think this is salvageable. Can't pronounce words. And I just feel that they need to be able to figure out what's causing the issues. Scott Satterfield even said during the press conference he is not at a point where he feels that he, is going to just stick with what he has. He's going to be mixing in guys. He's going to be bringing on some guys who are freshmen. He's been telling freshmen, hey, you need to get ready because you may be playing. It's not going to be like, oh, you need to wait until your sophomore year, you'll start playing. He says, no. If you're showing good at practice, then you'll be in there in the depth chart. for the upcoming games. So I'm very optimistic to see a lot of the freshmen playing. This past game, we saw Jadarian Boykin play, Desmond Tell on defense. So we had 2 defensive players we haven't seen in almost 3 games, and they did pretty good going in there. Now, is that going to fluctuate throughout the season? Probably. We're probably going to see a lot more faces, a lot more freshmen that we're not used to seeing. But for the most part, this is going to be a very questionable game going into Notre Dame. We kind of got off Notre Dame subject, but you guys, the consensus is Notre Dame is going to be a very powerful opponent, almost Clemson level, and it's going to be a very difficult uphill battle this coming Saturday.
Oh, absolutely. They're a title contender for a reason. Like I said, nothing against Louisville. It's just Notre Dame is in a completely different level. They're with Clemson. They're with Bama. They're with Georgia. They're among the few handful of teams that have a legitimate shot at hoisting the trophy at the end of the year. So this game, even if it ends up being a blowout, that's not going to be necessarily indicative of Louisville because Notre Dame's just that good.
Yeah. All right. Well, going to get on to a different subject, which is the score. What do you think the outcome is going to be?
I don't think Notre Dame is going to turn this into a shootout or a barn burner, but I do think that their defense is going to do enough to kind of keep Louisville's offense kind of on their heels a little bit, especially since they're still kind of being a little bit streaky coming off of that Georgia Tech game, coming off of that Pitt game. So I'm going to go 31-13.
I will give a quick pick, and then I got to run. I will have my official predictions later in the week, but so don't hold me to this one. But 41-17 came to mind.
Wow. All right.
That's really unfair to ask me. Like, that's a really unfair question. Like, what do you want me to say?
Well, Ashton, if you want, you can just say they're going to win, stay that optimistic level that you've always brought, and for the most part, just want to give big thanks to Mark Rogers for coming on the show. Sorry, I thought you worked for ESPN. I have no idea. I guess I saw that on LinkedIn for some reason that you're still with ESPN. All right, so for the most part, guys, Ashton, I know that's difficult to ask you. I know that this is probably not a situation you thought you'd be walking into tonight.
Yeah, I didn't see it until like 15 minutes before you sent me a list. I was asking for a list a little earlier.
I am so sorry about that. I've been working. I've been just trying to get everything done today, and I just last minute after I cooked supper, I sat down and I was just like, oh goodness, I need to send over this. So I was working as fast as I could.
I think as long as Louisville gets some of their early fundamentals cleaned up, or at least look better than they have the last couple of weeks, and start to play with a little more effort, a little more drive, because you could see in that Georgia Tech game, some of those tackles they were making just looked like they weren't putting forth any effort at all. Yeah. They just, instead of just leaning your body into, you got to arm tackle, you got to grab them. But I digress. As long as they play more fundamentally sound, with more effort, no matter what the score ends up being, blowout or not, I'll come away from that game feeling a lot better than I did coming away from the Georgia Tech game.
Yeah, it's definitely you're right. Tackling was a big issue. I really feel like they're going to hopefully work on this all this week. It's going to be the big thing that they're going to be sitting in, their conference rooms. They're going to be with the different position groups, and they're just going to be like, hey, defense, tackle. It's going to be hopefully the narrative. O-line, I did think that O-line did a little bit better than they did against Pitt.
Something that was interesting to me to see when the game started, Ronaldo Brown was not the starter at right tackle. It was Camden George. Mm-hmm. And Camden George got a majority of the snaps there, and he still plugged and played at guard positions for Chandler and Robbie Bell. And Ronaldo Brown was kind of the backup right tackle. And you might have caught this, but there was the penalty where he kicked the Georgia Tech defender's shoe out of bounds. And then coming back to the sideline, Dwayne Ledford was just reaming into him. He was saying some words that you're definitely glad the FCC didn't pick that up. Yeah. But if they're doing that there, I can only imagine what their practice is like after that performance. So I'm hoping they can get some of those things cleaned up.
Yeah. Now, mind you, Coach Ledford, great coach. He's one of the most technical coaches in the entire country. And, seeing those kind of penalties, it probably has, it just boils over. And sometimes, it doesn't matter what level you're at, a college football coach, a high school football coach, they're going to be seamed if they see something that they have been working on consistently and it just keeps on causing issues. Now, the shoe situation, I missed that situation. I'm going to have to go back and rewatch that. Now, Ashton, this weekend, you're going to be watching the Notre Dame game, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Now, so from your perspective, what do you think can be fixed?
As I said earlier, ball security.
Ball security, okay.
That's my main thing with the offense, ball security, and then, I don't know, I don't know if it's a focus thing or, like, again, as he said, it was energy. But, it seems a little off. I don't know. They just seem like they have less drive at moments than what they could do. So I don't know. I think it'd be mentality, like, especially since you're coming off a loss from a team that everyone's bashing you for losing to. It's definitely you're definitely gonna have to come in with the right mindset if you expect to do good on the rest of the season or like compete against teams like Notre Dame.
And while Louisville does have problems they need to correct from that standpoint, at the same time, you've got to give credit to Georgia Tech because they were doing an amazing job at getting their hands in there and actively working to strip the ball any chance they could. Yeah, Louisville has issues of their own with ball security, but you still have to commend Georgia Tech for their ability to tackle and simultaneously try and strip the ball at the same time. They did an amazing job in that game.
They were doing stand-ups and strips. Like, they were having one player hold up and another one going for a strip. Like, that's what teams train to do. Like, and they did that well. Like, I'll give them that.
Now, Ashton, I really do believe you're going to be a big game changer as soon as you go to Louisville in January, right?
All right, thank you.
No, honestly, like, I've seen a lot of your film, and I've seen a little bit of some of the previous year before that. But I honestly think you are going to be a big game changer all around, and I think a lot of you guys in the 21 class are really going to make leaps and bounds this next season. All right, I wouldn't be surprised if you and Vic were starting, and look at Aaron, coming in there and
don't sleep on Raheem.
Oh yeah, no, I'm not going to sleep on Raheem. No.
I was going to try to get him on. I was going to try to ask you if I could sneak him on, but he didn't respond. So,
well, that's all good. I'm going to probably do this again next Monday. So, you know what? How about this? Next Monday, we're going to try and bring everybody on. Almost all the commits. That's going to be a little crazy. But we're going to be reviewing, I believe it's the FSU game. That'd be the next one up. And I pray to God that FSU is just going to stay as awful as they've been.
We'll see.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, of course.
You saw what Jacksonville State had. They had Florida State on the ropes to start that game.
Yeah.
So we'll see how that goes. If Louisville struggles against this FSU team, there's going to be some discussions.
Yeah, there's going to be discussions, but I hope one of those discussions is we need new coordinators. I really don't think we need new coordinators unless we're getting into maybe the next season. Because when you look at your third year as the, it doesn't matter if you're a head coach, doesn't matter if you're a position coach or a coordinator. Your third year is the year that is judged based on how you're doing recruiting, how you're doing on the field, off the field, the mentality. And honestly, if those things can't be fixed in the third year, a lot of times you see head coaches make that tough decision, which is to replace certain key position coaches, which can either make or break a team. But honestly, I am very optimistic about this Louisville team next year. I'm still optimistic about this year. I'm very excited to see who is really going to step up to the plate, be the leader, and keep guys accountable. And that's one of the things that I think has been plaguing this defense is accountability and leadership. I think there are, the captains within the defense, but I just feel that there's just, for some reason, a mentality where guys aren't just, like you guys, like Matt, you've been saying, there's just no accountability for some reason, to a lesser extent of words. But for the most part, Ashton, I'm very excited to see you next season. And for the most part, I really appreciate you guys coming on the show, talking to us a little bit about what's going to be happening this Saturday. Very negative, unfortunately. This is going to be one of the downer episodes. I'm going to be very hoping I regret. I hope this Saturday Louisville runs off and Notre Dame just, thinks that they're just going to walk in there and be a cakewalk, and Louisville just runs away with it. And if they win, I will be a broken man. I will be a broken man.
Yeah, if Louisville somehow pulls off the upset, I'm sure I don't want to say like a lot of the wrongs up to the season will have been righted, but the narrative and the narrative nationally, locally, and the mindset within the program and around the program is going to go in a totally different direction.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, thank you, Matt. Thank you, Ashton, for joining me on another rendition of Cardinal Craze. I tried to say that word earlier. I couldn't get it out of my mouth for some reason. But, hopefully we can do this again real soon, and we can talk about the FSU game and hopefully how bad we're going to beat FSU. Hopefully it's going to be by triple digits. I'm really hoping. All right. But until then, I hope you guys have a good rest of your evening. And for the most part, I'm going to sign off here in a second. We can talk here in a minute. All right. Well, this has been Cardinal Craze. Go Cards.
Cards.
Appreciate it.